Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mind Aura Lab. You're in the lab today with Joyce. How are we doing today, Joyce?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. Also, from a fellow raver, did you go to Dream State?
I did. Were you
How
there?
was it? No, I wasn't there.
It was really fun. It was actually my first dream state, and I only really went because I had a lot of clients I worked with that I haven't met in person yet because I'm not like a
Okay.
huge trance person.
Mm-hmm.
But since a lot of my clients were going to be there, I was like, let me just go. Like it's 30 minutes away from my house. I want to like meet them, and I was only going to
Right.
go one day. But then it ended up being so much fun. I was like, I have to go the second day. So I went both days and it was like the best time. And now I'm like, I have to go every year.
That's awesome. That congratulations on your first Dream State.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people they don't know how to enter into the trance genre. And when there's a festival specifically for that genre, it changes their mindset. Until you see it in person and hear it coming out of the speaker, you don't know what trance will do to you in that moment.
No, that's so perfectly worded because I think that's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah, it's that's because Dreamsday is one of my favorite festivals, and trance is my favorite genre of music. Like I grew up listening to old school Tiesto, DJ Dean, and then most recently, like when I first started getting into shuffling, I picked up Above and Beyond their Ocean Lab tracks. Like when they remixed all of them, I was over the fucking top. I was like, all right, this is for sure the genre, and that festival has a special place in my heart. I'm taking a step back from raving for a bit.
I see. Well, hopefully I will see you in the future at one of the dream states.
For sure. So Joyce, to go into a little bit of your background, you said clients, like, can you explain to the audience what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a physical therapist and I'm also a certified strength and conditioning specialist. And I think we got connected through like my Instagram account, my
Hmm.
professional Instagram account, which is titled the PhysioRaver, because I've kind of decided to combine my passions of being a physical therapist and being a raver. And I kind of saw this gap between these two areas, between healthcare and raving, because I
Hmm.
think you know, a lot of us ravers, we and shufflers, we want to do this for a long time. We This is a big part of our lives, but a lot of the times we also or a lot of us don't really know how exactly to take care of our bodies or injuries happen right with shuffling or something will happen and it stops you from shuffling or raving and when you go to the doctors it's very common for them to say oh like well what is shuffling or like if your knee hurts or your back hurts and you can't rave, just stop raving or just
Hmm.
stop shuffling. But that's not something that's acceptable to us,
Right.
obviously. And I just want to make sure everyone's voices are heard. And it's kind of my way of giving back to the community. So I've kind of dedicated my whole mission into helping specifically like the raving community, the shuffling community, to build strength, build resilience so they can overcome their injuries and continue to do the things that they love.
That's amazing. So what got you into this path? Like, were you an athlete from a young age?
So I wouldn't consider myself like an athlete. I've definitely played sports, but
Hmm.
not competitive enough to like really be, on varsity or like play in leagues.
For sure.
But I've always been active and always been interested in the human body. So
Hmm.
that's kind of what led me into more courses, at least in university, to
Okay.
explore that field. So took a couple like human anatomy courses, human physiology courses, was really intrigued after doing the dissection lab, which I
Hmm.
know grosses people out, most people out, but I
Yeah.
was very fascinated by it. And then ever since then, I was like, wow, the human body is just so cool. Like what are some career paths that I can go explore that are in this area? And
Hmm.
physical therapy became one that was kind of like pretty apparent if you I just kind of follow down the path. So that's kind of what I ended up deciding to do because I knew I also didn't want to work like a regular nine to five job. I didn't want to be sedentary. I wanted to be somewhat active. I wanted to, have a more like social aspect to my job. And
Right.
as a physical therapist, you obviously have to talk to your patients a lot. You have to be able to communicate. And it just sounded like a pretty meaningful job because you get to help people get better. And so that's how I kind of decided to pursue this field.
Okay. Okay. And so when you were going through those courses and whatnot, what stood out to you that was, life changing for you? What was it that stuck out during your anatomy courses that fascinated you to help like with this line of work?
Yeah. Um, I think it was just overall when I was in the lab dissecting the bodies, really seeing how all the muscles, the tendons, how all of those things were connected.
Hmm.
I just thought that was very fascinating. Like if you pull down one muscle here, something else would move. Um,
Right.
that was just very interesting to me, and that kind of just sparked this whole like interest and path down this road. So it wasn't like, sometimes you have these stories where they get injured playing soccer, they tore their ACL and then they went through their rehab, but it was not really like that for me. It was just more so seeing the human body that really kind of intrigued me. And then ever since then, when I had to go, volunteer and shadow and
Hmm.
work in a physical therapy clinic, it was just very cool seeing, therapists do what they do and then patients walk out feeling better than when they walked in, and that
Right.
was always very cool.
Yeah, I've had my run-in with physical therapy on two separate occasions. One was when I was trying to set a personal record for 375 on squat, and I didn't warm up. I didn't climb like I normally did, and I was just like going by ego. And I
Lifting.
rem yeah, yep. And I was just like, no, I got this, and I didn't have a spotter either, so I could have. My friend was nearby, I just chose not to. So I had the guardrail set pretty low, and I just remember trying to dig deep, like big breath, and as soon as I hit the bottom of the negative contraction, I just was like, nope. My left knee buckled and it went inwards, and I hit the guardrails, and I was like, all right. So then after that, it was basically game over for heavy squatting for a while. So I went to PT for 3 months, and I was doing all of those small little
Mhm.
um, isometric movements, like the side, like crab stepping, all of that. And um, yeah, that was basically the day I quit squatting super heavy. I was like, all right, there's a lot more to life than being a power lifter. I think, and this was before I got into dancing. So I couldn't even conceive dancing after an injury like that. And then another injury that I sustained was a left gastroc injury. So I tore the actual gastroc, and I was out for a year for all jumping, running, dancing related activities, which was so painful.
Are you better now?
So much better. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
good.
great. Yeah, yeah. So like being in the physical therapy office and watching the people, as you were talking about, like clients coming in with injuries, and seeing them move on and progress with their lives and being able to get back into whatever activity they wanted to get back into, or a new one. Uh, I picked up yoga, and I did yoga for a whole year during that training session. And what was interesting to me was that I actually became stronger after I did yoga for a whole year, because my muscles were getting the proper full range of motion, first off. And then secondly, it gave me more core strength that I think I was lacking, and probably ended up not getting that squat in, that PR, because I wasn't engaging all of the muscles and just relying on the compensatory muscles within the legs.
Yeah, it's almost like it that led led to this whole floodgate of other things that you're doing now.
Yep, yep. It was yeah, it was definitely a defining moment for my physical ability for sure, because it went from yoga to running almost 19 miles over 2 days for a Ragnar relay, and then it transferred into rock climbing right after that along with dancing. So yeah, it opened up everything that I look at now, and I'm just so grateful for physical therapists. So that's why I was interested in learning about your journey.
I see.
So did you have any injuries like growing up that you had to deal with?
Honestly, not really. I think if
Mm.
anything, it's more recently when
Oh,
I also ego lifted a couple times. I have
here we
to
go.
admit, I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
In the past month, I probably ego lifted twice and like fucked up my back a little bit.
Oh no.
But I'm okay. It's I think this is a good part of just being a physical therapist. It's like even though sometimes I get flared up, I aggravate myself, I know it's nothing. Like I know I can take care of it on my own. I know exactly what I did. I know exactly like the exact moment where I flare myself up. So I know how I need to overcome it. So I'm not as scared about what I did to myself.
For
I,
sure.
I take full accountability for the fact that I let my ego get the best of me.
So what were you doing?
I was just deadlifting and just going too heavy too soon.
Mm.
And then my back, like I felt it a little bit and I was like, oh, I'll be fine. Like I can still do it. Did another set and then just ended up hurting a lot more
Mm.
the night of. And I was like, all right, I overdid it. So did a couple of things I know normally would help. Uh, the next couple of days just took it easy, felt better. 2 weeks later, I was in the gym again. I was like, all right, let me just do some RDLs and just I just went too heavy too soon again. Like I didn't warm up
Mm.
properly, like what you did, like didn't build it up, and then flare myself up again a little bit. But it's okay.
So in that instance, if there were someone that were to injure their lower back, what are the protocols that you go through, that you walk through for yourself?
Yeah. So first is just to make sure, like I always screen if there's like a neuro component in the sense that like if anything's traveling down my legs or if there's any movement I do like bending forward, bending backwards, is that going to cause anything down my legs? Because
Mhm.
anything that travels beyond the spine into the legs is obviously you have to be a little bit more cautious of.
Right.
In my case, it never went down the legs. It was still just located, concentrated in my back. So I knew it was going to be okay. And then the next step is just figuring out what movement you're sensitive to. Like, is it more so bending forward or bending backwards?
Mhm.
Bending forward was more sensitive for me. Bending backwards actually made it feel better. So
Mhm.
then in the couple days after I initially injured it, I just focused on movements that made me feel good. So it's a lot of like laying on my stomach, doing prone press ups, just reinforcing the movements that felt good. And
Right.
then little by little, slowly introducing bending forward again. And um, not starting off complete just with like standing up and then bending forward, but more so, for example, having my feet on the wall. So I'm in
Mhm.
like a tabletop 90-90 position and then
Okay.
lifting my butt up. So it's a little bit more controlled. I'm slowly introducing the movement of bending forward and then
Mhm.
just gradually getting myself used to it again. And when I was finally able to touch my toes again without my back hurting, I was like, okay, I'm ready to do some deadlifts and RDLs again. But
Mhm.
I just went too fast.
For sure. So what stretches were you incorporating to get back to where you're at initially?
um, it's called the prone press ups.
Okay.
Do you want me to show you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so this one is pretty easy. All you're doing for this one is like if I'm on the ground like
Yep.
this
Mhm.
and I'm laying, I'm just pushing up
Ah, okay.
because this felt really good for my back.
Okay.
When bending forward and slouching down was
Mhm.
painful. So that's something that I started off doing initially. And then
Mhm.
I was doing this one. So if I'm in this tabletop position
Yep.
and then I'm slightly trying to drag my heel up,
Ah, okay.
tilting my butt, I'm
Mhm.
practicing kind of tilting my pelvis.
Mhm.
I am practicing that component of bending forward, but just
Mhm.
not as intense as if I were to stand up and completely try to reach my toes.
Okay.
So yeah, it's all about rehab is all about finding like an entry point of what your body can tolerate,
Mhm.
figuring out what movements are bothersome, and then slowly scaling back the movement to what is initially bothersome,
Mhm.
but just doing it step by step and putting checks and balances in place to make sure you're not overdoing it.
It's interesting. So with that, what is the differentiating factor for what is like a injury versus just soreness? Like how do you describe that? Where you're like, is this actual pain or is this just discomfort from lactic acid buildup?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it's going to be different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think a lot of people, especially people who may be new to working out or very deconditioned,
Mm-hmm.
they can perceive like soreness or lactic acid buildup as pain. Like,
Right.
that is painful to them. So it's always good to make that distinction. Think, and even just soreness, people's tolerance to soreness are different too.
Mm.
So
Right.
that is also another distinction to make. But generally, I like to use, rather than like a pain scale, I like to use more so like a traffic light analogy.
Okay.
So I usually go by green light, yellow light, and red light. And so green light is usually, no pain. Like there's no soreness whatsoever. Yellow is something where, it's a little bit uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It can be soreness, it can be pain. That's subjective, but it's just something that, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's still tolerable. So, for example, soreness like DOMS, some people may think it's yellow just because it's uncomfortable to walk a day after a heavy workout,
Right.
or maybe something that's like a little dull and achy that is still kind of yellow. Versus red is something that's very sharp, like
Mm-hmm.
sharp pain or just intolerable discomfort. That's red. So anytime you feel like you're in the red zone, you stop. You don't continue to do what you do. You just stop doing that activity.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you're in the yellow zone, that activity is okay to do, given uh, while keeping in mind how much stress you're in that day, how much sleep you got, how hydrated you are, how well fed you are that day. So for example, if something is a little bit it's tolerable, but let's say that day you're super stressed, you didn't sleep well, then maybe you back off. Versus if all those other things are pretty well managed that day, then you can push a little bit. Versus green obviously is just okay, it's very comfortable to do, you can continue to do it. And then the more that we kind of stay in that yellow,
Mm-hmm.
rinse and repeat the process, the more the yellow becomes green and the more the red becomes yellow.
Mm.
That's how I like to
Yeah.
describe it.
No, it's a good analogy for those who are listening that are trying to get back into it or just assessing like where they're at right now. I think you make a lot of good points, especially ones that people need to constantly hear. Sleep,
Yes.
water, nutrition. It's it's so basic, yet most people are they're so conditioned by adding more stimulants to their diet and makes it, I guess, less stressful on their body, but in reality, you're just dehydrating your body the entire day. So you might have that quick burst of energy where you're like, oh, I can continue pushing and pushing, and then at the end of the workout, feel like shit, feel exhausted, feel like, oh man, now I'm more stiff than when I first actually entered this. And I think the fourth component that you also bring up is stress, because
Mhm.
stress will prolong injuries for such a long amount of time. I've had so many different injuries where I was stressed out and I would have the pain just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And I couldn't figure out, like, man, I'm stretching this out. I'm not actually working it. What is causing this? And I just couldn't fathom that the cortisol levels raised in your body are prolonging an injury. But once you start realizing that you have to start meditating or like pull back and start like resting more and start really attacking the root of the cause, which is sometimes stress, then you can start relaxing those muscles because so much of our tension is built up in our shoulders, built up in our necks, and then most importantly, I think in the hips. The
Yeah.
hips, I think, are the worst because even with yoga practice, most of the people that would do these classes like that are yin form, which is basically you would hold a pose for like 5 minutes at a time and then switch. You basically fall asleep into these poses, but the root of getting that deep tissue stretch was initially all that tension and stress that you've been building up for so many months or years. And then some people would cry afterwards because it's an emotional release of their body being like, fuck, I've been holding this for so long. Thank you for releasing it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I like to tell my clients too, the ones I can kind of identify that, stress is a big component of their pain, is a lot of times when we're stressed, like you said, the shoulder, the neck tense up. Sometimes we tense up our jaw and we don't even realize it, but we tense up our butt, we tense up our thighs. And if we're just constantly working with our muscles tensed up, like obviously when you go work out, your body's already being overworked by how tense it is just throughout the day.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because it's like, all right, I'm supposed to be going to work out to relieve stress, and
Right.
here I am adding to the stress. So now I'm stressing out about the thing that's supposed to be relieving the stress, and now I'm just more tense at the end of this.
Yeah.
So it's just it's a wild circle, like vicious circle. And I think this is why I incorporate cannabis into my like recovery times, especially when I know I can't work out. Like I have to tell myself, I'm like, all right, I can't dance today. I can't go do anything strenuous. So what's gonna slow me down and allow me to stretch? Like I can zone out to any type of music I want to listen to, and I can just hold these poses, and it's not gonna be as painful with just a hit or two, or even just taking a tincture or a gummy. It's going to help out with relieving some of those aches and pains that you have and allow you to slow down so that you don't push yourself over the edge.
Yeah, definitely. It takes discipline to get yourself to the gym, but it also takes discipline to tell yourself to not dance or go to the gym if you're feeling flared up, for sure.
Right. So when your clients come to you, how do you structure that rest time? How do you teach them how to slow down?
I it really depends because I think, and that's why I think it's really important to have, a personalized approach when it comes to like rehab, because obviously it's not going to be a one size kind of fit all solution, especially just with how complex everyone's lives are these days and
Hmm.
different demands. Um, but yeah, I start out just having a conversation with them, like really get an understanding of their situation, how much time they have on their hands, like how much stress they're dealing with. But what I like to do and how my systems work is I want to establish things in place to help with their sleep, help with their
Hmm.
stress, whatever that may be. So I always start by asking or checking in to see how much sleep they're getting, first of all. And if they're not getting enough sleep, if they're chronically getting 5 to 6 hours, we always try to implement ways to at least increase the sleep. So things or tricks I like to use is first of all tracking, see if you're sleeping enough. If you're not sleeping enough, um, figuring out a routine that's going to help you get more sleep. So, for
Hmm.
example, if they're scrolling on their phone for 2 hours before bed, okay,
Right.
let's try to be realistic and cut that down to an hour, and that gives you
Hmm.
1 more hour of sleep. How do we do that? Okay, maybe we implement like a go to bed alarm or implement somewhat of a nighttime routine. Like the alarm goes off every day at 10 p.m. When that alarm rings, that's your signal to get ready for bed, go to sleep. That's how I try to address the sleep component.
Hmm.
When it comes to stress, it really just depends. Like asking them if they have good support systems, asking them if they have good stress relief tools, and if not, I always try to suggest or steer them towards something to do with mindfulness, like taking a couple seconds out of the day to meditate or to reflect, do some breath work. I think it's all very important because it's a lot of times overlooked. I think a lot of people, if you're not exposed to it, you know, don't really believe in it. But I really am a firm believer of how much breath work is important in healing and our body
Hmm.
mechanics as well as the spiritual aspect. So I always try to steer them towards that direction too, incorporate some sort of mindfulness into their day to really help with that stress component.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue that most people have time or try to like get time sorted out for is how do I practice mindfulness throughout the day when there's so many things that are on our plates, right? As soon as we wake up, we're probably checking our phone and instantly we're going through 10 million things that we could possibly be doing that day outside of work or, what other things that you have to get done for the day. But I think, it's either the morning or the late afternoon where you can refocus and like get back to yourself, your inner voice. For me, for instance, that is in the morning. So I get up and I'll stretch for 10 to 15 minutes because I know if I don't do at least 10 to 15 minutes, I have tension that is going to be building up in my lower back and in my shoulders. And I already know that the rest of the day is going to be set up for failure. So just giving myself that time and taking a moment to breathe allows me to reconnect with, okay, I know I can get this done today. I'm all right if this doesn't get done today, and you just go down the list of priorities that you need to sort out. And I think if you have that time, if you're able to slow down, you're going to have a much better day than just be overwhelmed right off the bat.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's almost like taking yourself out of the autopilot mode for like 5 minutes, even just to recollect yourself before heading into the day.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I've been trying to instill into others and like just try to think about like what are you doing to help yourself out win for the day, because it's so important for us to collectively show up respectfully to one another. But if you're constantly stressed out every morning before you head out the door, you're introducing that same reciprocal energy that's going to be bounced back at you. If you're stressed out with someone else, they're going to go right back and bark at you as well. So it's just one of those things where it's like just start taking care of your body more and the environment will respond accordingly.
Yeah, it's like the law of attraction.
Yeah. And that's something that I've had to actually reevaluate over the last couple of years because I was in high level positions and startups where I was just constantly just 100% trying to outperform myself from the day before, and I was getting so tense, but I was like, wait, my output is starting to decline. It's like but I have such high output all the time, but now the quality of the work is starting to decline and my scale of irritability is starting to increase. So where is this coming from? It's like, well, you're not giving yourself proper rest. You're not giving yourself the outlets that are necessary to allow the body to just relax, and you're taking other substances to escape the uncomfortableness. So, like, getting to a point where you can start developing more self-awareness is key to, I think, health and longevity.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a component that's also overlooked in like physical therapy and the healthcare industry. Is it's often just not addressed, or at least when I was working in a clinic too, because now I fully just work for myself. But when I
Okay.
worked in the clinic, when I was working in the insurance-based model, it's really just focusing on, what exercises we can do, like how complicated can we make it so that, we're making it super intricate to try to target one specific muscle to try to make the person better. But what
Mhm.
I've learned kind of throughout the years is the sleep, the stress, like all of these things play such a huge role that when I was working in a clinic,
Mhm.
That was something that that was out of my league to address. Like, it was not within my scope to be able to address some of those things, but it's such a big component that we need to be addressing these things because they 100% play a role.
So, what would you give people advice for in order to get better sleep?
There's So I'm not a sleep expert by any means, but I think the couple guidelines I always give people is making sure that you're getting good quality sleep is important. So setting your environment, like sleep hygiene, is going to be very crucial. So for example, the optimum sleep temperature, it should be between uh 60 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a good baseline to have.
Mhm.
Some other things include you don't want to have overhead lights as soon as the sun sets. So kind of when the sun sets, you kind of want to just start using like floor lamps, no overhead lights, because that kind of tricks your brain into thinking that the sun is out.
Mhm.
Um, some other things, try not to drink an hour to 2 hours before bed. Try not to eat 3 hours before bed. So that ensures that, you don't wake up to go to the bathroom. Your blood glucose doesn't spike in the middle of the night that causes you to wake up.
Right.
Something else that is really important is making sure you get good sunlight in the morning. I can't remember exactly what the time frame is, but I think the first hour or so, potentially, don't quote me on this, but somewhere in the morning, you want to get sunlight early because that sets the circadian rhythm for you to get the
Mhm.
day going. And then so you actually get tired at night. And then some other things, like don't consume caffeine after 2 to 3 p.m. No, nothing too sugary also late at night because those things can all keep you up.
Yeah, I like your word sleep hygiene. That's very good. I think a lot of people will relate to that. So, Joyce, with your raving clients, so how do you teach them to stay injury free when after a 3 day like festival?
So this is a question I get a lot, and I always tell people the prep work isn't what people usually think that starts 2 to 3 weeks before the festival. The prep
Mm-hmm.
work happens all year round. It's just like how you can't expect to retain all the information on an exam when you cram it like 2 to 3 days before the exam,
Right.
which is why it's very important to make sure you have a healthy routine all year round. Another example I like to use is same as marathon runners. Like, these people are very experienced runners, but they also train for a marathon 6 to 7 months out. You don't see them starting to train for a marathon 2 to 3 weeks out. So it's the
Mm-hmm.
same for ravers. A lot of people, most Americans or most people just on in the world are sedentary now. A lot of the adults don't meet daily physical activity requirements. And so when you go from sitting in a chair 8 to 9 hours a day to wanting to go to a 3 day festival, standing and dancing for over 12 hours, like, your body is it's gonna take a beating if you're not used to that kind
Right.
of activity. So I always encourage people, it's not the 2 to 3 weeks leading up to it where you start going to the gym, where you try to eat healthy, but you really have to do this all year round. Like, get the activity levels in, get those steps in. It doesn't have to be going to the gym. It doesn't have to be like doing Pilates or yoga. It just has to be something that you enjoy, that you like to do, and you can sustainably do for a long period of time. I think that is the most important when it comes to starting out, trying to live a better and healthy lifestyle. It's finding something that you like.
Yeah, that's actually good advice. I think to add on top of that, you have to really pay attention to the weekend like it's a competition. I feel like that's how I always view it, like right beforehand, is I'm about to basically do a marathon all weekend. What stuff am I going to have that sets me up for success so that I can enjoy the entire weekend without feeling like I have to hold back? And I think the things that I like to stack up beforehand, I want a full fridge full of fruits. First off, getting electrolyte packets have been lifesavers, like having those on deck at home and at the rave, I think are the best things to bring with you. Having plenty of the proteins that you need necessary, if that's protein shakes, then so be it. Like being able to have the necessary amino acids and electrolytes for recovery is essential. And the last thing would be just drinking enough water. I think people neglect that aspect so much, where it's the most, I think it's the most important component for the whole weekend. You know, in my early days of going to festivals, I would completely neglect water because I felt like it slowed me down. That's quote unquote, you can ask all my friends in the early days, they'd offer me water bottles and they'd be like, why don't you ever drink water? I'm like, dude, I just want to keep dancing. And you know, they just look at me like you're fucking crazy because you're just built like a camel. And at that time, yeah, I could keep going with, you know, drinking a liter after 5 hours of dancing and get away with it. But as I started to get older and creeping up to the 30s, it started to go the opposite way where I was like, fuck, I feel like shit. And the next day would be even worse. It's like, why am I so tight? Oh, well, because you don't have any fucking water. You're not keeping your body at this optimal point so that your body can recover and be able to function, and the ability for the muscles to keep contracting involve having that water component. So that's what I always try to stress to anyone now. Is like, if you're going into a festival weekend, stay hydrated, especially if you're coming to Las Vegas.
Yeah, definitely. Stay hydrated.
So, what are the hardships of being a creator and running your own business?
I think there's I think two biggest things. The first one is discipline. I think when you work for yourself, and in a way it becomes a lot more flexible, but then also in a way it means that you can either work on your business with your free time or just decide to fuck off during your free time. And sometimes it can be really hard to choose to work on your
Yeah,
business.
right.
So I think discipline definitely is a big thing, and just finding ways to make sure that even when you do technically have the free time, you decide to still work on your business and build into something that you know you that's sustainable and that's meaningful and impactful. The second thing is, I think, the mindset aspect and the self belief aspect. I recently, I think, came across a podcast where someone was saying like business or entrepreneurship is 90% mindset, and I honestly couldn't agree more, because I think a lot of people, they decide, or they start out deciding to do something, but they deem themselves a failure or that it didn't work, not because they've actually tried everything and then it didn't work, but just because they didn't believe in themselves or didn't just stick it out for a little bit longer to see if it was going to work out.
Mhm.
So I think those two things are the biggest challenges, because I definitely, and I think I'm at a place where I've built the PhysioRaver to a point where it is sustainable and I can see myself doing this for a long period
Mhm.
of time. By no means am I at my end goal, but I definitely think I've still come a long way when it comes to overcoming like limiting self-beliefs, um when it comes to overcoming things I consider like failure, or things that didn't go so well when I was testing things out. So I think, yeah, the mindset aspect is definitely something that is very challenging when it comes to being a creator and building my own business.
Couldn't agree more. I think that is the hardest part of it. It's the mindset. It's seeing results that are lower than your standards of expectation, right? It's seeing the work go unnoticed for so long. It's taking time out of multiple weeks where you're putting into your project and you're having to sacrifice. You're not being able to do the other things that you would rather be doing. It's like sitting in front of a computer for hours, like looking at an edit and saying like, is this perfect enough? Or, you know, writing out a piece of content. and just being able to be satisfied at the end of it, because most of the time most entrepreneurs aren't satisfied, and that's what continues to drive us, that gives us that fire, because we're always looking for the edge of how we can perform and show up as a better version of ourselves. So I completely relate to what you're talking about.
Yeah. Were there times where you felt like you wanted to give up and go back to, the higher level management roles?
I mean, yeah, there's been times this year where I've probably hit like 2 to 3 low points where I was just like, why did I quit my job last year? And when I get to that time, I wrote down all of the examples of why I decided to quit and move away from that industry,
Mhm.
and I wrote out specific events that triggered me and that I can read back today and be like okay with reading it out loud. But in that moment, I was like, no, this made you so angry that you were so frustrated you couldn't even bear the thought of doing this again and again and again. And so, like, looking back at those moments, it's tangible. Like, you can reconnect with the feelings that you had. So, like, being able to revisit the past from a piece of paper and just like read that comment, it made me think, okay, if I was able to get through that, I can get through this, because this is within my control.
Mm.
How I respond to this ultimately shows what the outcome is going to be. And I feel like you're probably in that same boat.
Yeah. It's almost like it's not the situation, it's your reaction to the situation.
Mm, yep.
Yeah, because there are definitely multiple times too where I was like, why didn't I just stick to being a PT in a clinic? But I was like, no, no, no. This is, even though it's hard and sometimes unpredictable, I feel like I have way more freedom. I'm much happier. I'm actually doing what I want to do, and I feel like I'm making an impact.
Hmm.
And so in the end, it's all worth it.
Yeah, and that segues into my next questions. Like, how do you define success?
Yeah, I thought about this question a lot, and I think it's very subjective, and I think my definition of it is going to change depending on, like, the time frame, the stage of life I'm in. But at least right now, I would say, I think success comes from just not being content, like not staying stagnant, always trying to better yourself or better the world in some type of way. um I think that is something that I really try to hold on to, because I think it's very easy to, and I think this is maybe more applicable to someone who is like working a traditional 9 to 5 job. I
Hmm.
think it's really easy to get content with where you are. For example, if you're making a good amount of money, you're just, kind of going through the motions. Some people might find that successful because, yeah, like you're earning good money, you're making it, you're living comfortably. But I
Hmm.
think that's something that I eventually, if I was in that role, will get tired of, because I'm always kind of searching for like what's next. Like initially I started the PhysioRaver just so, for example, like I thought, okay, maybe if I was making like 5K a month, I would think that I'm successful. Like that is
Hmm.
success to me, that is enough. But then once I hit that benchmark, I'm like, no, I want to make like 10K. I want to work with Insomniac. I want to work with like DJs and all these things. So
Right.
how I define success just keeps changing.
Hmm.
So at least in this moment, I think success is just having that unrelenting motivation and drive to just continue to better yourself and reach for the next goal.
It's good. You're gonna look back on this in a year and you're gonna be like, huh, that's what I was thinking a year ago. And then you'll be
Yeah.
in a completely different area. No, I like that. I think for my perspective, I like to define success by basically putting in all the effort and creativity that you can to show value to others in the world. And I feel like the intrinsic value that you receive when you are able to effectively help someone else achieve the result that they desire is a success in my mind. I think that over time we are creators that are going to provide value in some way because ultimately all of us have a trade. We have probably three core trades in our lifetime, right? That we're pretty good at, that we can say with confidence we're able to teach other people. And you need a variety of creators in the society because everyone has a particular blueprint within their brain that attracts them to certain subjects where they're like, yes, I know how to, build this entire machine, or I know how to fix this machine, or, I know how to fix the body, just like with you. Or there's people that are solving diseases, right?
Mhm.
Whatever it is, there's always a niche that people gravitate towards. And being able to showcase your abilities to others and they'll in turn give you something of value, that's what it's about.
Mm, yeah. It's just making an impact in this world, like being able to impact others and help others in a way.
Right, and that's why like building this community for me feels so right. And that's the other thing that I had to think about when I hit those low points. It's like, what the community that I was a part of, was did I fit in to that community? And the answer was no. So it's like, okay, then your problem is you don't fit in. What's the solution? Well, create one. Create one where others can fit into the community. And then from there on, it just expands the network outwards so that I have a ton of different people that can help each other in the long run. And that's what I'm focused on this week, actually. So, uh, I'm going to a bunch of panel discussions this week with other people that I've had on the podcast who are scientists in the cannabis industry.
Ooh.
And I'm so like I'm at a loss of words because there's gonna be 8 different people that I get to see in the same room that I've interviewed. So like it's a full circle moment of connecting with everyone that I've spoke with who all have been a part of this growing community. And now it's like, okay, cool. I get to be in the presence of greatness.
I think that's how I felt about going to Dream State and meeting my clients. It's like that full circle moment.
Right. What did you feel like in that moment?
It was it was just so fulfilling because in a way it's like they were all really good dancers to begin with. Like some
Yeah.
battle, some have just, had decades of experience. And it was just crazy to witness it live, seeing them dance and knowing that I played a part in either getting them stronger or helping them overcome pain.
Mhm.
It was just crazy to see, like, wow, like you guys are so good and I played a part in that. And that's insane.
That's fucking cool. Yeah,
Mm,
being able to connect with your clients and yeah, you watch the videos, you see the reels, you're like, "Oh, wow, objectively that looks amazing, this person's style." But when you see it in person, it's a whole different game changer.
yes, exactly.
Because you're feeling like the energy that's coming off of all the dance moves that they have, and then also the environment is just so stimulating that it adds to the style. So you're just like, ah, this is yeah, it's a very spiritual experience that most people should be able to witness. I feel like if you go to any festival and you're able to dance with other people, there's nothing more free.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree. Like there was no other festival where I've seen so many shufflers in one place.
Yep.
That was just crazy to witness.
So Joyce, what would you like to see more of from the dance community and rave culture?
I think what we need to bring back is more plur.
Mm,
I think Dream State was an exception because I think a lot of it are, potentially OG ravers that have been in the scene for a while. But I think with some of the newer ravers, or like the more like trendy scenes, like Tech House, Day Trip, like some of these other festivals,
mhm,
it's like so common now to see like on the internet that there was a fight that broke out somewhere. And that's just not what we're about. And I think even just in crowds, I'm I I think I notice less and less people saying like please or excuse me when they're walking through the crowds. People are just a little bit more rude.
mhm,
So I would love for people to just chill and just be nice and be more polite to each other when we're at these festivals. But I think another thing that's a little bit more pertinent to my cause is I
mhm,
would definitely like to see more discussion about fitness or health in the raving community, because I don't know if your algorithm is showing you this, but I have a lot of just memes showing me, or like a lot of reels where it's like, oh, POV, you're a 25 plus raver, and it's like them just like in knee pain or like having to stretch, or like just like memes of like their backs hurting all the time.
right.
And I've always kind of just made it's almost like an inside joke with me and my audience now, because whenever they see someone post something like that, they always send it to me, because I think it's just a not it's a pretty negative like connotation to put on, aging ravers, let's say, because 25 you're not old, even 35 you're not old. Like, we should not be putting labels where, oh, as soon as you turn 25, like you can't rave, or like you're too old to rave. It's funny, but it's dangerous, because the more of these things you see on the internet, the more you're gonna subconsciously think, oh, like, yeah, like I can't rave now, or my back hurts because I'm old. But that's definitely not the case. Your back hurts because you probably don't exercise enough and you don't take care of your body, not because you're old.
Very well said. That's also why I wanted to combine all of my passions together as well to put onto a podcast, because I am about to turn 35 next Monday, and I've been raving. Yeah, thanks. And I've been raving for 10 years now. So I'm starting to slow down just because I have other interests that I would rather pursue. However, anytime anyone would ever see me, they're just like, you have unlimited stamina. How is it possible? And it's possible because I am training a year round. I'm not just doing it just to look good when I go to the festival and look jacked, just like to dance around all weekend and then lose all the muscle. It's like, no, I'm here to enjoy myself, but I have a core routine that I have to do every week in order for me to perform and feel my best. Like, if I'm hopping in a dance circle, I want to be able to execute every move that I can think up in my head creatively. But if I'm eating like shit, not drinking water, if I'm not stretching, if I'm not doing cardio, if I'm not practicing, not being mindful about my overall health and well-being, of course I'm going to post something like, "Oh, I'm too old for this," or, I can only hang for one day because that's my like the only ability that I have. Like, no, I'm able to last all 3 days and still gonna hurt after the third day because it's a lot to go through. But the fact of the matter is, I still made it to the third day because of the things that I do and all of the healthy habits that I've developed. So, yes, I agree with you. There needs to be more discussions about how to be healthy in our rave culture. And that's why I'm starting to reach out to more of people like you, yourself, that are involved in the healthcare side of things, that have been in fitness and health for a long time, that have techniques to spread your message out there as well.
Yeah, thank you for bringing me on, because I think this is just a very important message that more people need to hear.
Yeah, that's uh Drugs and substances only take you so far. I'm sorry, but you cannot fucking rely on dropping acid all 3 days at a festival and expect to be able to be standing at the very end of it. I I have seen people go through waves of just using all of these things to make it through all 3 days, and it's like, what the fuck? You could pretty much only use it one day and be able to hang the rest of the others. But the fact that you're relying on this, like, already shows me that you're compensating because you lack the physical ability to hang at a festival, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure. Like even recently I had a client, he's 62 and I think he told me on a Monday, he was like, "Hey, I'm sorry I can't hit my workout today. Like I was out at an afters until 9 a.m." Um, but he didn't do any substances. He was
Yeah.
just it was just because he at this point he feels better than he did like 2 years ago before we worked together because he actually decided to take care of his body, decided to implement a routine. So
Mhm.
now he's just like, yeah, I can go without doing anything. I can last and I feel way better than I did 2 years ago. And he's older now. It's only because he started taking care of his body.
62.
Yeah.
Going to the afters.
No, I was like, you go harder than me. 9 a.m. Like this is
Wow.
insane.
No, that's but yeah, you're going back to like age is just a number. It's a matter of the mindset and then building those healthy habits.
Hmm. I was like, I'm
So
proud of you.
proud of him too. So to start wrapping things up, Joyce, what advice would you give your younger self if she was listening to this podcast today?
I would say chill out. Everything will be okay. And it will all work out. I think that's the best advice I can give myself.
That was pretty good advice. So much, so much so like everything that we've spoken on today has basically been like slow down, preparation, and check in on yourself, like where you're at, where are you feeling the pain, where can you start to pull back on, and adjust. I think most of the time it's just making adaptations.
Yeah, totally. Because I think, again, kind of like the theme of what we're talking about today, people get very caught up in like the moment of whatever's stressing them out. But like things I'm stressing out about today, a year from now, or even a month from now, I'm probably not going to be stressed over. So it's just, yeah, it'll be okay. Like it might seem like a lot and everything's going to shit at the moment, but it'll all be okay.
Joyce, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, having this discussion with me. If people want to connect with you after listening to this, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram, and my handle is the PhysioRaver.
Okay. Do you have a website?
I don't, but I'm working on it.
Okay.
So Instagram is where I mainly put out all my content.
Okay. No, sounds good. I will put that in the show notes. So until next time, and hopefully we meet at a festival in the future, I'm looking forward to having our next conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Joyce.